Thanks, Pam. Welcome everyone to the second in our Digital Ethnic Studies speaker series. This speaker series, as well as other elements of the Digital Ethnic Studies cluster, programming within that cluster is funded by the Dean's Office of the College of Arts and Letters. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today, Dr. Maira E. Álvarez, who is the 2022-24 Early Career Provost Fellow at the University of Texas at Austin. Before joining UT, she was the American Council of Learned Societies 2021 Emerging Voices Fellow at Arizona State University School of International Letters and Cultures. Dr. Álvarez earned a PhD in Hispanic Studies with a certification in Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies from the University of Houston. She's the founder of the Digital Humanities Project Borderlands Archives Cartography, or BAC, a team member of United Fronteras, a team member of Torn Apart / Separados, and a consultant for the digital project Yo Soy Porque Tú Eres at Fort Lewis College at Durango, Colorado, one of 6 Native American serving non-tribal colleges. Welcome, Dr. Álvarez. Thank you for making the time to be here with us and to talk to us about your work in digital ethnic studies.
Thank you. Should I start, or Pam, you're gonna do the land acknowledgement?
Oh, I can quickly do that. I put it in the chat as well, but for millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay.
Well, thank you, and hello, everyone. I would like to thank the Digital Ethnic Studies Interdisciplinary Cluster for the invitation to the speaker series, and also to thank Suresh and the team that making the Zoom presentation possible, and thank Pam for promoting this talk as well, and everyone for being here today. So let me share my screen, and we can get started. Right. Okay, are you able to see the screen of the slideshow, or?
We can see the slides, but I don't know if you want to click on slideshow so that it's just showing just the one slide at a time.
Okay, sorry, it's the button there. Okay. So my presentation is Digital Approaches to Ethnic Study, and it's more of a also a intersection of my experience through this journey on digital humanities. Let me see, there's something obstructing the screen. Are you able to see the slideshow? Hello?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see the main slide. I don't know if you click through at all, but just the opening slide is visible. Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm changing between screens here. Let me see. Sorry, apologies for that. Technology, because mine stopped. I stopped seeing it, so trying to figure out where it is. Oh, here it is. So I would like to begin with the content. I'm going to be talking a little bit about myself as an introduction. I'll be also doing a land acknowledgement, and Afterwards, I'll be talking about DH and ethnic studies, the intersections of those two in regards to my work. And I'll be talking also about Borderlands Archives Cartography, which is one of the projects I founded along with a colleague, as well as Torn Apart Separados and United Fronteras. And this is with the intention to see the intersection of DH and ethnic study, how that looks like within my area of research, and hopefully something that can be of use for others. And at the end, I'll have some final thoughts about this journey and process of intersections between DH and ethnic studies. And first of all, I'm talking from the University of Texas at Austin, which acknowledges that we're meeting in indigenous lands of Turtle Islands, the ancestral name of what is now called North America. And moreover, I would like to acknowledge the Alabama, Coshata, Cado, Carrizo, Comecrudo, Huahuitlecan, Comanche, Kikipu, Lipa Apache, Tonkawa, and Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and all the American Indian and indigenous people and communities who have been or have become part of these lands and territories in Texas. So the intersections in digital humanities and ethnic studies, that's where my work resides. And in order to understand this, rather than giving it a definition, I would like to take upon a Perton blend view of digital humanities as a series of communities of practice that highlights the specialization and contribution of other areas of expertise and fields. And also with this in mind, how I see ethnic studies, or where my work resides within the ethnic studies, is the research between it's a contestation of decolonial and post-colonial approaches to challenge colonialism and culturally relevant, and that shows through celebrating legacies of underrepresented communities and community response and social justice base, so that the work that we do fills the gaps in the histories. This allows us to think the connections and break out of the disciplinary and technical specialities. And with that in mind, when I'm gonna start talking about a little bit about the projects and see how that becomes, those intersections connect. And also just to expand on those three concepts on the decolonial, on the ethnic studies in regards to decolonial, it's also the challenge of how colonialism has shaped the current power dynamics and economic, political, and social systems that communities and students engage with. In regards to cultural relevant, it's not just celebrating, but understanding the legacy and lessons of underrepresented communities in American history. And in regards to community response and a social justice base, is so the work that we do fills the gaps of history, which is a struggle by itself. And we'll see that through the projects that I'll be presenting. Since as we face the banning, for instance, we've been facing the banning of books, of ethnic programs, pushback on critical race theory, inclusive institutions, and the list goes on. So it's in regard of thinking all of this, where I situate this work that started as a graduate student and continues throughout my career. And also just a little bit introduction about myself is that currently I'm a postdoc in Borderlands Histories at UT Department of History. I have a PhD in Hispanic Studies and began my work of DH 5 years ago as a graduate student. This presentation is a reflection of that work and the intersections of both. So I would like to start with Borderlands Archives Cartography. Change this slide. Oh, sorry. Before that, I apologize. I'm starting between the two windows. Before that, expanding on this intersection, rooted in this intersections between my work on digital humanities and ethnic studies is the idea of breaking with that single story that Chimamanda Adichie refers to as that creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they're untrue, but that they're incomplete. And they make one story become the only story, which is the case of my work that focused mainly on borderlands and Hispanic studies. And also in that, having said that, it's also in regards to what Rubika Rizam is having the opportunity within DH to intervene in the digital cultural record, to tell new stories, to shed light on counter stories, and create spaces for communities to produce and share their own knowledges, should they wish. It's the great promise of digital humanities. And I think it's also where those intersections lie between ethnic studies and not only DH. The first project that I'll be talking about is Borderlands Archive Cartography. This project was created in 2017 as independent, non-institutional project by Silvia Fernandez and I, when we were graduate students. She identifies as a transfronteriza from Ciudad Juárez, El Paso, since she was moving back and forth between the two countries. And I as a fronteriza from Laredo, Nuevo Laredo border, which means that I mostly stay within the US side and travel at times to the other side, but not as a transfronteriza would do to go to the university, studies, work, and so on and so forth. We grew up with different experiences, but understand the borderlands as a space where different cultures coexist under strong political, economic, and social hegemonies, as well as a space where regions influence each other, but maintain their own identities. Border archives cartography emerges as a resistance to the single stories, as I mentioned, of the border created by national discourse, with intention to protect the nation, and that has had great repercussions on borderland communities, since stereotypical and simplistic representations forcibly become part of the border identities and have an effect in the local, national, and worldwide view. Borderlands Archives Cartography, also referred to as BAC, is a transnational digital archive that completes newspapers records of both nations, comprising the US-Mexico region through a digital map. BAC is dedicated to locate, map, and facilitate access to 19th and mid-20th century newspapers from the past and current border region. It maps the geographic locations of newspapers publishing established to provide a deeper historical and archival context in order to foreground the history of US-Mexico borderlands and its communities before and after the current division was drawn, and address monolithic perceptions of border as division. Now we use newspapers or focus on newspapers because although the printing press was first introduced in the Americas in 1533, 14 years following the arrival of Spaniards to the region now known as Mexico, communities in the Southwest have been practicing multilingual literary production and self-documentation that predates the birth of the United States. In the borderlands, these cultural interactions gave rise to new identities as a result of loss of territory, immigrations, exile, deterritorialization, transport flows, and transnational dynamics. Considering this, when creating the database, we included title, state, city, language, number of issues, dates of publication, archival sources, and historical period in order to situate the newspaper in its historical context, as well as the address which was obtained directly from the newspapers, which is something that was not there before. The accuracy of the coordinates is essential since it incorporates the exact location of the newspaper establishments thus contributing to the documentation of the printing press in the borderland. The data was then integrated into Carto, which is not an open source. It's a private platform, a geospatial tool to visualize and analyze the data in a digital map in order to explore and question the established assumptions of cartographies. Having said that, one of the recurring challenges when creating digital projects such as this is the use of tools, digital tools, and knowing that those digital tools at times are not accessible or costly, and or require certain knowledge of technology. It's where it lies, the challenges lies to find out which tools we can best use for certain projects, but also something to consider and something that the humanities constantly questions within digital humanities, which is, the accessibility, who gets to use this digital tools that are being created, and what are the limitations and some of the challenges that they present, when they're unable to, for instance, integrate other languages other than English, and also the capacity that they need in order to function. So those are some of the things when it comes to projects such as this that use maps to present data visualizations and information in general. So BAG crosses multiple borders, geographic, linguistic, and disciplinary. It intersects praxis and theory from a decolonial, post-colonial perspective, as I mentioned before, that challenges representation within knowledge production. And that where is the intersection of digital humanities and ethnic studies lies within this work. Also, I'm going to show you some visualizations from the data that we gather. The image that you see on the left, it's the collection of all the newspapers that we gather, but seeing how they're connected to each other. The circle within the inner circle, it's the states that they're coming from. And the next layer is the period they belong to, when they were published, what years they were published. And then the third circle, the outer circle, is the titles of the newspapers, and all the newspapers that come from this particular regions. And the data on the data visualization on the right gives us an idea as well where these archives are reside in regards to Borderlands Archives cartography. And despite seeing the Mexican side, which is towards your right, it may seem that there's less. It's not that it's not the case. It's just that these newspapers were published mainly from the capital of different states. And compared to the US, where we see not only states, but we also see cities, especially within the border region. So that also tells us another layer of information in regards to archival information and where these newspapers were being published and how they're being published. So compared to Mexico, in the US, we had newspapers also being published in Las Cruces, or in El Paso, or in San Antonio, or Austin, Houston, San Diego, and so on and so forth. While in Mexico, they mostly reside within the capital archives. The next project that I'll be talking about is Torn Apart Separados. Torn Apart Separados emerged in 2018 as a collaboration among 8 academics as a rapidly deployed critical data and visualization intervention in the US 2018 Zero Tolerance Policy. The project aggregates the cross-references publicly available data to visualize visualizes the geography of the immigration policy in 2018. It also draws attention to the massive web of immigrant detentions in the United States. Working nimbly and remotely from our site in the United States over a 6 period of time, a small team of researchers set about to identify research of data and immigrant detentions and those complicit with this complex infrastructure. So among the team were librarians, students such as myself, scholars, from different backgrounds. And that is, again, what Purdom talks about when it comes to communities. The first turn apart data visualization was the clinks that you can see here on the top, which records the inactive and active detention centers that uncover the monster hidden at plain sight that many didn't believe or wanted to believe existed. What is frightening is how embedded it is in our society, and many of us ignore it, or even worse, normalize it, especially along the border region. One of the conversations we had while working on the data visualizations was not to include the address of the detention centers to protect the children and the families from additional trauma, as people were going to the locations to protest in favor or against these policies. And this is some of the conversations that take part on creating projects, the ethical practices and how to not only how to visualize the information, but also how we gather that information, with what purposes, and so on. Now, while the clinks visualizations uncover a monstrous mechanism, the eye, which is the second image at the bottom, takes us to the location of detention centers, allowing us to see how it's not about a borderline located between Mexico and the US, but the sentiment of a government towards immigration and people of color. The eye takes us to isolated areas, while others shows us neighborhoods, schools, daycares, or stores nearby. The detentions and the eye, what visualization does was to reverse the roles, where the government is under surveillance now by utilizing the same tools used against unrepresented communities, and challenging the smoke screen that covers the mechanism that profits from people of color through the maintenance of detention centers as visualized and recorded in the data of Torn Apart. Torn Apart second volume it's focused on a deep and radical new look at the territory and infrastructure of ICE financial regime in the US. So following the money, it's how we got to this information. This data and visualization intervention peels back layers of culpability behind the humanitarian crisis of 2018, as people across parties contribute and benefit economically from human suffering. The district visualization at the bottom is a view of the cumulative award since 2014. And one thing to clarify is that because of the limitation of time that we took a week to do this, or almost a week to do this, the further back we could go was 2014, but it gives us an idea of what this infrastructure is doing and what it looks like. So since in 2014, 2 contractors by congressional districts. Another visualization is the freezer that examines the core banalities of ICE through connections between products, contractors, and subsidiaries. This categorization schema highlights the interplay of ideological and physical control behind ICE. Doctrine, machines, the threat of violence, reforming bodies, surveillance, the flow of bodies and goods, and walls, and the rhetoric of the walls. The link is at the bottom about this project. So if you want to follow or just explore this project as well, furthermore, please do so. Because there's more visualizations to this project. Okay. The final project that I'll be talking about is United Fronteras, which is a collaborative initiative emerged in 2019 as an autonomous and independent DH project that creates a third public digital space. As a team, we created a transporter digital cultural record and documented digital project focused on the US-Mexico border or borderlands. As a first phase with historical representation from pre-colonial times to present, this compilation is presented as a digital directory to an exhibit with a metadata and images of material and digital projects compiled in public exposed production of this borderland in the digital cultural record, and maintain its memory through static sites using minimal computing methods and tools for access to areas with low bandwidth. So what minimal computing does, compare, for instance, to back where we're using Carto, a private platform, is generating, well, there's some already generated programs or tools that require less bandwidth, as mentioned, and that allows for people in other regions where they don't have a strong access to the internet or a stable internet to be able to still see the information under this type of tools or projects. United Fronteras promotes pluralistic praxis. It brings together active and development and inactive work that leverage digital components to document the borderlands from multiple perspectives and diverse digital platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, blogs, Omeka, Carto, among others. So what it does, it steps away from DH rigid standards that often favor expensive technological platforms. And this is what does United Frontera does with this. It's bring to the attention, again, the accessibility of technology. COVID has demonstrated to us that not everybody has access to the internet, that not everybody has access to a computer or to a phone, a smartphone. So with this in mind, what United Fronteras has demonstrated to us is that people are using whatever they have available and accessible to also contribute to this knowledge production in their own ways and from their own communities. So United Fronteras pluralistic praxis expands to Spanish and English, brief description for each documented project. Additionally, its structure is created to be replicated and modified to other borders, where a new team can create a digital cultural record that documents past and present border histories through local knowledge. And the goal of United Fronteras is to reach borderland communities and trace digital records of the borderlands across the Americas, using technologies to deconstruct geographical boundaries and shared knowledge. So what do all of this have in common when it comes to intersection of DH and ethnic studies? So in the case, as I mentioned, in ethnic studies, one of the components is social justice or active participation. And what all these projects do, for instance, in the case of BAG, is a bridge that works towards deeper analysis in the US-Mexico border, its political tensions and transnational transporter dynamics. This counter discourse visualizes the shared history of this region across borders and creates an alternative form of documentation or documenting the historical memory of the US-Mexico geopolitical border by inquiring the content of the newspaper archives with the aim to new interpretations of the past. Through BAG's digital map, new interpretations of the past lead to a better understanding of the present and helps us to resist the impositions of the future. And what Turnabout Separados does is a living resource, one that the team research hope it will build upon to intervene in the pressing social issues. Since it hasn't stopped, the families continue to be separated, children continue to be missing, and it's still a pressing issue. So much of the project's power is in the archival potential, because not many are documenting what is happening as a historical record, and that is due to the information, how it's spread out and torn apart. It's an example of that, pulling from different resources, from different databases, to kind of make sense of what is happening with this humanitarian crisis. United Fronteras, it's an effort to document the production of knowledge from the local productions and beyond the border, to challenge the national rhetorics on borderland communities. So it's a work that is not done by one individual. It's a accumulation of projects that people are doing on their own, activists, community members, students, scholars. Everyone is making an effort in their own spaces, from their own communities, to challenge this rhetoric of the single story. And I would say that the three projects do that. As I mentioned, it's challenging the impositions of the single story by presenting and also producing knowledge, from ourselves as well, be part of that production of knowledge. And I would just like to end with this quote, or paraphrasing Deborah Santiago, who's the founder of Chief Executive Officer Excelencia in Education. She did a presentation at the Center for Mexican Americans at the University of Houston, where I was able to see her presentation. And something that struck me and was kept in my mind was that she explained and how institutions in the past, were, well, I think it's still than today, are set for students to adapt, to the institution. But she emphasizes and strongly encourages to change that, and for the institutions to adapt to the students' needs. Because as she said, the students of today are not the students that we have, 10, 20, or 30 years ago. The world has changed. We have technology, we have other forms of communicating, and that has changed also the way that, should change the way that we teach, and be more inclusive when it comes to students' knowledge and collaborations and production of knowledge. We know that digital humanities can develop intellectual identity once, as it happened in my case, where this field, community field, allowed me to explore furthermore than what my research initially was meant for. And so those are my experience and the intersections between digital humanities and ethnic studies in regards to my work. And also on the note on Deborah Santiago, the other things that we need to think about is the challenges that not only that switch must require from institutions adapting to students, which is how do we integrate that? How do students become active participants, but also how the work is going to be recognized, and as well for academics and professors as to how that work that is being done, like in this case on the site, because many of these projects were independent and not institutional. So how that work is also recognized as part of the work that we're doing for the students that are in our classrooms, and that we're trying to teach this other forms of these intersections between digital humanities and ethnic studies. So I'll stop there. I think I reached my time, and I'll open up for questions. Thank you.